Welcome to our week 9 instructor session. So, for this week, we're really going to be honing in on that skill set of speech design. So, you've already submitted your rough draft of your speech and you've received my feedback. And now I really just want to go over how successful speech design works. So, let's go ahead and jump into the material because we have a lot to cover. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the stairway to speech success. When you start off with a speech assignment, whether in a classroom setting, a professional setting, or even a personal setting, you want to kind of start off with this stairway to speech success. So when you think about this, I want you to think about it in terms of an actual set of stairs. Okay, so kind of picture that in your mind as I go through it. So the first bottom step is going to be to find the right topic. How do we do this? Well, obviously, it depends on what you're supposed to be speaking on. In this course, we're obviously working on a persuasive speech assignment, and so we wanted to find the right topic for that. We wanted to find something that we felt passionate about and that we wanted to advocate for or against. And you've already done that at this point, and you've already even submitted your rough draft. So from here, we're this is just some information that can help you with future speeches as well, but once we get later into the lecture, then you'll find some tips to help you with this current speech too. So the first step is to find the right topic. After that, we're going to step up one more. So step 2 is going to be bring the topic into focus. So we want to make sure that the topic is not too large or too short. We want to, for lack of sounding like Goldilocks in this situation, we want to find a topic that's just right. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Step 3 is to find material and support. Now, we already did that with the first part of this speech project, and I believe that was in week 6. So, but in any speech setting where you're trying to create a speech, you're going to want to find that material and support after you choose the topic and focus the topic. Next, you're going to start to design the speech. And so we know that a speech should consist of an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. But a lot of times my students say, well, I understand that it needs to consist of those things, but how do I design an introduction, a body, and a conclusion? No worries. We're going to talk about that in this session today. So the fifth step is going to be to organize the speech. That kind of ties into design as well. So we'll talk about that in a moment. The sixth step is practice the speech. So you always want to make sure that you practice the speech. I think so many times students focus on the written portion, and so they they write and they construct and they really hone in, but they never take the time to practice the speech. Practicing the speech can help in a lot of ways. It can help us to see what our nonverbal communication looks like when we're delivering a speech. Our speech is not going to be nearly effective if we're reading the whole time, or we're looking around the room, or we're fidgeting in our chair, whatever it is. So, you want to practice the speech, and a great way to do that is to practice in front of family and friends, and also sometimes just standing in front of a mirror. Practicing the speech in that manner can help as well because it can help you to actually see what you're doing. And then the seventh step is really easy, just do the speech. You've gotten this far, so complete it. So let's really focus on these steps. Step 1 is find the right topic. So when choosing a topic for a speech, and not necessarily in this course, but just as a whole, you want to choose one that you know a lot about, because you don't want to just say, you know what, I don't know hardly anything about this. Let's maybe do a speech on that. No, you want to choose something you know a good bit about. Or you want to choose one at least that you want to know more about, that you have some information on. And then another thing you can do is just brainstorm. So brainstorming for a topic is basically a method of generating ideas by free association of words and ideas. So just sit down with a piece of paper and start writing out anything that pops in your head and then start narrowing it down. And so that's how brainstorming works. So you need to look at, when choosing the right topic, you need to look at, what am I most interested in? What do I hope to accomplish? Because that depends on the situation you're speaking in. Do I know enough about this topic to speak on it? Can I make it useful and interesting? That's important. We always want to make sure that we can make the information useful to our listeners. And also, can I share experiences with this topic, or can I at least relate it to the real world setting? People need to find that topic grounded in the real world in some way. So the second step is going to be to focus your topic. And here, once you find something you're interested in and you want to talk about, make sure to examine it to see if it's too broad or too short. I think a lot of people skip this step, and so they bite off more than they can chew, so to speak. For example, let's say that you have 4 minutes for a speech. Only 4 minutes. So think about these topics. The topic of cancer, is that too broad, too short, or just right? Well, that's going to be too broad because there are many, many, many different types of cancer, and that's not something you can cover in just 4 minutes. So let's say that you were doing a demonstration speech on how to bake an amazing lemon pound cake. Is that too broad, too short, or just right? Well, that's going to be, sorry, I just saw my typo there. All right, so how to bake an amazing lemon pound cake. That's going to be just right. And hear me out on this. So you only have 4 minutes. Well, you can go ahead and pre-measure the ingredients. You can show us how to mix everything up. And from here, you can have a finished pound cake to the side and just show us what the finished product would look like. So I understand that baking time can't factor into that, but that's okay. You can just show us how to mix it up and then have a finished product and say, ta-da, this is what it looks like. All right. So that would be just right. How to dust a bookshelf. Well, is that gonna be too broad, too short, or just right? Well, in my opinion, 4 minutes to show somebody how to dust a bookshelf is too short. I mean, there's not much that goes into that. So two important principles when you're focusing your topic is you need to have a clear idea of what you want to accomplish, and you have to work to determine the general purpose, specific purpose of your speech, because that's going to help you to really make sure that your content is staying focused. So, for example, a general purpose of a speech is, well, let's start here explaining what it is. The general purpose is a broad goal of your speech, what you hope to accomplish. Very short, though. The specific purpose is a bit more in depth. It says more detail about what you hope to accomplish. And here's an example. The topic, if you're doing a persuasive speech on why you should donate blood, so your topic might be donating blood. Your general purpose is right here to persuade. And then the specific purpose, you're literally going to bring that down to persuade and then just detail it a bit more to persuade my audience to help save a life and donate blood. Okay, so it's just that simple. And we create these things because we want to make sure that when we're developing our speech and designing our speech that we always can go back to this and go, am I still persuading people to donate blood? Am I still persuading people in my speech to save a life and donate blood? And if your answer is no, you're not, you've kind of went off on a tangent, then you need to hone back in on your main points of your speech. So a few things to think about when creating a specific purpose statement is is this statement one single statement which which contains one distinct idea? Well, it is here. So that's what you want to do. You don't want to ask a question here. You want one single statement which contains one distinct idea. Also, does it meet the assignment requirements? In the the topic that I have here of why you should donate blood, if I was supposed to be giving an informative speech, that wouldn't fit the assignment requirements because this is a persuasive speech. So you want to make sure that it meets the assignment requirements. Can I accomplish the speech in the time allotted? That goes back to what we were doing a while ago about these topic choices. If it's too broad or too short, then that's not going to work for this speech. Is the purpose relevant to my audience? Is it too trivial? Is it too technical? Well, if you're doing a speech, let's say, about technology to a group of people that don't know a lot about technology, you don't want to get too technical with your terms because it's just going to go over people's head and they're just going to start to tune you out. So you need to make sure that your topic's relevant to your audience. All right. So, what is the difference between a specific purpose statement and a central idea? Well, a specific purpose statement says what you hope to accomplish. So, this is one of the most important early steps in the process of developing a speech is just to come up with what your specific purpose is, what you want people to be able to obtain from your speech. A central idea is a statement that basically says It's a statement of what you expect people to gather from your speech. So here's an example. Let's say that your topic was massage therapy, and let's say that your general purpose is to inform. Your specific purpose is to inform my audience on the benefits of receiving regular massage. And then your central idea is one statement that you would probably find somewhere in the speech that sums up what you're going to be speaking about. So the central idea might be massage therapy is often seen as primarily a way to relieve stress, but its benefits also have deep connections to a person's overall health. Okay, so things to keep in mind when creating a central idea. Is it a complete sentence? Is it phrased as a statement rather than a question? Just a few different things there. So, is it relevant to the audience? Is it not too overly technical? And then that leads us to the third step, and that is finding that material and support in your speech. And that's what we were doing in our own speeches in week 6. So, once you have a topic and a clear idea of what you want to accomplish, you need to start gathering materials for support. You need to start gathering your research. So, some good examples you can include in your speech are narratives. So maybe you found a narrative or a story that you'd like to include in your speech is a great example. Narratives are stories that illustrate the ideas of the speech. These can be really great for the very beginning of your speech or the very end of your speech. Okay, so introductions and conclusions. Examples also help us in a speech. They help to illustrate points. Next is testimony. That might be your personal experience with something. And then, you know me, I always recommend facts and statistics. Facts and statistics give us hard research data that sometimes can be very hard to argue with and help to solidify our points. So remember that you always want good hard facts in your speech from reliable sources. And you always want to include those verbal citations I've been talking about to really highlight your research and add to your credibility as a speaker. So a simple according to the American Heart Association and stating your fact can add a lot of credibility to your speech. Next, you have step 4, and that's just design your speech. So I talked about this a while ago, but we know that a speech, just like a written paper actually in other classes, should consist of an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Now, that's easier said than done, right? A lot of students say, well, I know it needs an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, but I just don't know where to get started with that. So we're going to discuss that here in just a moment. Although the body of your speech is actually the middle part of your speech, you want to plan that before the introduction. And that's because once you write out the body, you can take bits and pieces of that and include it in your introduction and your conclusion. So I'll show you in just a moment. You want to limit the number of points that you're making in your speech. Listeners will remember your speech better if you don't have just a huge amount of main points. So most speeches should contain somewhere between, I would say, not 2 to 5, I would say 3 to 5 main points. Okay. So if you've got 10 main points you're making in your speech, you're probably not hitting your time limits, that's for sure. And if you have that many main points, you're probably not providing enough detail on those points. So you're just stating them and moving on. 3 to 5 main points gives you a lot of time to dive into each point before moving to the next one. So you want to again use your support through facts, examples, quotes, statistics, all of that. And you want to make sure that your speech has an order to it so it has a nice flow. So let's talk about that introduction, body, and conclusion, because I told you we were going to talk about how to design that. So we know that a speech needs an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And by the way, you can use these techniques to construct essays for classes as well. So just a little tip there. So a lot of students tell me, oh, I know what I want to say in my speech, I just don't know how to get it started. Well, that's what a great introduction's for. So in an introduction, you want 2 things. You want an attention getter and then to preview your main points. So what do I mean? Okay, the very first thing you should say is an attention getter, something that grabs the attention of the audience. All right? Now, what can an attention getter be? Often these are stories, quotes, questions, facts, and statistics. Okay? So you don't want to start off your speech with, "Hi, my name is, and today I'm going to talk about." That's not going to grab anybody's attention. Instead, you might want to start off by saying, and I've used this example a million times so far, so I'm just going to keep using it. But you might want to start off your speech by saying, literally, as soon as you turn on your camera, looking at the camera and saying, according to the American Heart Association, 52% of Americans do not know how to properly perform CPR. And that's why today I want to talk about what CPR is, how to perform CPR, and how to make sure that you are prepared to save a life. That's an introduction, guys. So you don't want to say, "Hi, my name is," today I want to talk about. You want to grab the attention of the audience. A story, a quote, a question, a fact, or a statistic does that well. Then you want to preview your main points. That's when I said, and that's why today I want to talk about, and I outlined 3 main points I wanted to talk about. In doing this, you're building a good and trustworthy relationship with your audience, and you're really capturing their attention and giving them a taste of what you're going to talk about in your speech. Next, you move on to the body of the speech, and that's where you take those main points that I just discussed. I said what CPR is, how to properly perform CPR, and how to make sure that you're prepared to save a life. So I'm going to take each one of those main points I just said in my introduction and go over them individually in the body of my speech, okay, with a lot of support and details when I discuss them. Then I'm going to move to the conclusion of my speech, and then there's 3 things we want to do here. We want to signify the conclusion. We call that a signpost. We want to restate our main points. And then we want to leave the audience with a memorable statement, something that provides closure to the speech. Okay? And that can be as simple as saying, in conclusion, that's my signpost. In conclusion, today we discussed how to properly perform CPR. Or no, excuse me. In conclusion, today we discussed what CPR is, how to properly perform CPR, and how to make sure that you're prepared to save a life. And then I would end with a memorable statement. And again, that can be a story, quote, question, fact, or statistic. And I might tell you a story about a time that I experienced a situation in which I needed to know how to do CPR. And thank goodness I knew how to do it and was able to help that person. Again, it doesn't have to be something like that. Stories, quotes, questions, facts, statistics. All right. So then we move on to organizing your speech. And that is actually basically what I was just talking about. So outlining can help you to organize your speech. Using note cards and putting bits of information on there can help you as well. Just make sure that when you're creating note cards that you're not reading from the note cards, that you don't put too much on your note cards because you're going to end up reading that way, and that you're not looking down at them the whole time. But you can use them for prompts to help to keep you organized. And then the 6th step is just practice your speech. And we've already talked about that. That's, you should, when you're practicing your speech, when you're delivering your speech, you want to sound like you're talking with the audience, that you're not reading to them or reciting the information to them. You want to sound like you're having a discussion, kind of like I'm doing with you right here. It's a one-sided discussion, but it sounds like we're just talking to each other. So the best way to present your speech is to speak naturally, to use the extemporaneous method. What that means is you'll organize your speech well in advance, and you'll put keywords and phrases on your note cards. And as you deliver your speech, your wording is going to change a little bit each time, but the main points stay the same. Okay? Then you'll want to rehearse your speech, work on your use of vocal variety, meaning your inflections of the voice, your tone, your volume, things like that. Show passion when you're speaking, and then suggest confidence. Even if you're nervous, you can fake confidence, guys. So work on that. And then step 7 is just step up and do it. Okay, and we've already touched on this a good bit, so I just want to go over it a little bit with you here. But you've got the parts of speech. Like I said, just like an essay paper or a letter or something along those lines, a good presentation is made up of an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So developing each one of these portions of the speech makes for a great presentation. But how do you do this? Well, we just discussed that. So an introduction should motivate the audience to listen. The very first thing you should say is an attention grabber or an attention getter. The terms are interchangeable. And again, we just talked about this, but you can use stories, quotes, questions, facts, or statistics for this. So with questions, you can use two types of questions. One's called a participatory question. One's called a rhetorical question. So that might be, you might say, by a show of hands, how many people in this room are organ donors? That's one that you want people to truly participate in by raising their hands. Or you might say, oh, I'm trying to think of something. Hold on. Have you ever thought about, you might ask this of your audience, have you ever thought about how many lives you could save by one simple act of kindness? Probably not. That's why today I want to talk about, and it would be a speech on organ donation. Okay. So that's one that you don't want people to say, well, yes, I have thought about that. You're not looking for an answer on that one. You just want people to think about it. So that's called a rhetorical question. So again, the very first thing you should say is an attention grabber, and that would be a story, a quote, a question, a fact, or a statistic. Don't ever start a speech with, hi, my name is, and today I want to talk about. Next, you're going to preview your main points. So this is where you give them a taste of what you're going to talk about. That's why today I want to talk about what organ donation is, how it works, and how you can give one final act of kindness to other people. Okay, I don't know, something like that. All right, so let me give you a better example, one that I've got typed out here and not just kind of throwing off the top of my head. But here's an example of an introduction. Notice the question at the very beginning that I'm going to state. That's your attention getter. Okay. And then later on in the speech, we preview our main points. So listen. Did you know that the average medical coding and billing professional makes $43,410 a year? That's your attention getter. Further, certified coders earn $7,500 more per year than non-certified colleagues. In addition to this, because of the shortage of people entering this field, CareerStep.com, notice that verbal citation, CareerStep.com expects a 21% job growth in this field. Pretty interesting, right? So with that being said, here's your preview of main points. That's why today we're going to discuss the benefits, job potential available, and why you should enter the medical coding and billing program. Good communicators are needed. All right. So if you notice all of this here, it's actually kind of a few things I did. Not only did I ask a question, but I included facts and statistics here as well. You don't have to do all that. You could just ask a question if you want to start that way, or give a quote or a story or a fact. But, this is just kind of an example for you. And then I said, so that with that being said, that's what today we're going to discuss. And I gave you the points we're going to discuss. I previewed my main points. Now, I'm going to take these main points that I outlined here for you, and I'm going to break them down into the body of the speech. So the body of the speech just basically breaks down the points you just previewed in the introduction. So I'm going to take all those points I just previewed, and I'm going to go over them one at a time, discussing support for it. One at a time, discussing support for it, okay? A good rule of thumb is to have at least 3 main points in your speech and to really elaborate on those main points, and really not more than 5. So don't forget your verbal citations as well. And this was a good example of a verbal citation that I just gave you here. In addition to this, because of the shortage of people entering this field, CareerStep.com expects a 21% job growth in this field. I'm telling you where I got my research from. That's a verbal citation. Okay. And then you move into the conclusion of the speech. And so in the conclusion, we're just looking to give closure to the speech. If you've ever sat in on a presentation and the speaker was done with the speech, but you weren't sure if they were done or just pausing, a lot of times that's because they didn't have a really good conclusion. So conclusions give closure to the speech. They help us to signify the conclusion that the speech is ending. They help us to recap the information so that the audience really retains it, and then they leave the audience with something to think about. So this is how you would design a conclusion. You'd have your signpost. In conclusion's fine. Okay. So once you got done with the body of your speech, you would say, in conclusion, and then you would restate your main points. All right. And then you would end with a memorable statement. And a memorable statement just helps to bring that speech full circle. It gives psychological closure to the audience. And so memorable statements are just like attention getters. They're just found at the end of the speech. Okay, so a memorable statement can again be a story, quote, question, fact, or statistic. So let me give you a good example of what a conclusion could look like for that speech. So in conclusion, today we discussed the benefits, job potential available, and why you should enter the medical coding and billing program. So I gave my signpost here in conclusion. Then I said today we discussed what we discussed. That's restating my main points. And then this last bit here that I'm going to state is a quote, and that is my memorable statement. Okay, so let's go over it. In conclusion, today we discussed the benefits, job potential available, and why you should enter the medical billing and billing program. So with that being said, and in the words of George Washington Carver, education is the key to unlock the golden door of freedom. Choose to educate yourself in this desirable field today. Okay? So that's it, guys. That's what a conclusion looks like. All right. I hope that helps you to understand speech design and really helps you to hone in on the feedback I've already given you and really polish it up before your week 10 assignment. And of course, before your week 12 speech recording. So, that being said, let's switch gears for a second and talk about your week 9 assignments. Okay, so we're logged into our course, and just as we always do, we're going to click modules. And we're going to scroll down to week 9 because that's where we're at in the course. Okay, and then we're just going to start like we always do. We're going to click on week 9 overview. As always, you have a summary of what we're going over for the week and the objectives we hope that you are able to achieve by the end of the week. Click next. You have your weekly reading assignment. It tells you what chapters to read this week. Next. That's where you click on your e-textbook to access your readings. Next, we have your week 9 interactive lecture. As always, just click the link down here and it will populate that interactive lecture in a different window. And you'll scroll through until the end. Okay, and I'm going to close this window out. We're going to click next. You'll have your week 9 discussion. As always, your initial post is due by Wednesday night at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. You'll have until Sunday night to respond to 2 fellow classmates in a thought-provoking manner. So right here is what you need to discuss in your initial post. And right here is what you should be discussing in your responses to your classmates. Okay, we're going to click next. We've got your week 9 instructor session. Obviously, once this meeting closes, I will post your recording here. We've got your week 10 overview, or excuse me, once we move to the week 10 portion, obviously that's the end of our module for week 9. So I am going to go back out here. That's week 9 that we just went over. You know me, I like to talk a bit in advance for your next week, just so you're prepared. So in week 10, you'll have your speech project final speech. So you're basically taking the feedback I gave you in week 8 and some of the information I gave you in this week 9 instructor session, really polishing up that speech, that written speech you've submitted so far, and then resubmitting it in the week 10 assignment area. Obviously, next week you'll resubmit it for my final thoughts. And then from there, we'll have week 11 to kind of work on things. And then week 12 is where you're actually going to record your speech. Okay, so we'll talk more about recording the speech in the week 11 instructor session because I want to go over how to use YouTube, how to record, and so forth with you. But for now, that's what you should be working on is week 9, and then keep working on polishing up that feedback I gave you in week 8 and the notes you've taken in this meeting, and really polishing up that speech for your submission in week 10. So otherwise, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm always available to you. You can reach out to me by clicking inbox in the course and sending me an email that way. You can also reach out to me at sdavis@fortiscollege.edu, and I'm happy to assist you in whatever I can. Thanks so much and have a great week.